Theology, theology, with Pitts and Crook and MOB. Theology, theology, and Tonk too. Yahoo!
Well, hey, welcome back to yet another week of Theology Talk with Tonk featuring MOB, T. Pitty, and Tom Croak. We are all here today wanting to talk about just one thing. Typically, we talk about three areas of the same thing, but today we're just going to focus on one thing, and that is online church. We've been doing it now for 5 weeks, and the great thing about this, in my opinion, is that we can all talk now out of experiential wisdom. Prior to this, guys, we had, some churches doing it, and then people would throw rocks and, critique it. But now that we're all in it, I think that it gives us a little bit of credibility, at least from, experiential wisdom, to say, hey, here's what I'm experiencing. And then from that, maybe address some at-large issues. So that's what I want to do today. I'm just gonna pick on a few of you guys. We're just gonna move it around the horn. So let me just ask the first question, which is, what has it felt like to be going to church online for the past 5 weeks? So T. Pitty, let's start with you. What has that brought to you? What are the feelings like for the past 5 weeks?
Well, past 5 weeks going to church online has kind of given me mixed feelings. I do feel plugged in because my church is very good at having different types of services. We have 2 services on Sunday, and then throughout the week we will connect with small groups. But I'll be honest, I can be distracted while these things are going on. While I'm at church, I'm focused in on what the pastor is saying and worship and everything. But as online, I can easily get distracted and do other things while the message is going on.
Yeah.
So I get it, but at the same time, it's been a little rough.
Well, now here's the big question. Maybe I'll bounce over to Tom Croak. Are you dressing up to go to church every Sunday?
Oh man, by dressing up, you mean actually getting out of my PJs? No, not at all. I mean, we'd have that debate all the time. For Easter, it's like for Easter, it felt special, so we actually put on like shirts, right, in terms of it. But otherwise, yeah, you just kind of wake up, you roll out, you get your coffee going, and you sit down on the floor or on the couch, and there you are. Like, it's laziness but delightful. I wish I could go to normal church that way a little bit, but
and that is, yeah, I want to bounce over to MOB. That part of this, that needs to be part of the equation, Matt, is, we're not most of us aren't putting our suits on and Sunday dresses, but neither were we rolling out of bed in our PJs. And so we, should that play a factor? Should comfort reign, or should we, how has that affected you and your family the past 5 weeks?
Yeah, I would say kind of the same thing as T. Pitty. It's different. It's a lot different. I'm trying to be thankful though, because I'm imagining, well, what if we didn't have Zoom? What if we didn't have technology during this season? We would be even more distant from the ideal, right? So yeah, it's been different, but no, at the O'Brien house, we do not dress up either. I think today's the first time I've done my hair in probably, I don't know, 2-3 weeks. Last time I wore a hat. So no, I'm just like Croak. I'm not dressing up. So yeah, it's a little bit different there. So
yeah. I want to talk about the benefits and challenges maybe, but to start that, I guess I want to take maybe a meta narrative approach, which is, hey, what is the church? Because I think we have to start there by way of, if we're going to have benefits or consequences or challenges, well, what's the baseline? And so what would be, if you guys have any good working definitions, how would you define the church? And I'm not talking about the universal church, capital C, but really the local church. What would be some of the characteristics or distinctions that you find in Scripture that would define the local church? We'll start back around. MOB, what do you got?
Yeah, so I would say church comes from ecclesia. It's when the called out ones come together, and they come together under uh, eldership, under leadership. There's deacons present, and I know we've talked about this before, but you're celebrating the Lord's Supper, baptisms, you're serving one another, worship, you're hearing the proclamation of Scripture, and you're using your gifts to serve each other. So yeah, when the called out ones come together for the purposes that God has set out in Scripture.
Anything to add to that, Tom Croak?
Well, I was just saying, I totally agree with that. I think where I wrestle with it is that definition of gathering together is doing the Zoom call considered gathering together. Are we actually meeting the biblical mandate? Or, I mean, except for per se the, baptism, it's hard to do a Zoom baptism, I think. Haven't figured that out yet, right? But apart from that, like, are we meeting that gathering aspect of it?
That's a great question. T. Pitty, what do you think about that? Are we gathered like right now? I mean, 4 different homes. It's, in the morning, we're hanging out. This is a gathering in the 21st century, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, we are. I see your faces. We're talking, we're communicating, but there's something about being in someone's presence. Something about being around someone, and that right there, me being alone in this house or apartment, I don't have anybody here. No, this is not a sad story for me, but I'm just saying, it's beautiful to have someone here with me to share a space. I was thinking about what the church is for. The church is also for encouraging, laying of hands, and praying for each other. I can't, it's one thing you all praying for me right now, but what a beautiful thing just to come over and just be in my presence and lay hands and just pray over me. So that sense is not here with this sort of online situation that we're in.
That's a great clarification. I know in God's economy, he knew this was coming. And even when he wrote the scriptures or inspired the men to write the scriptures, he knew that technology would evolve into what it is today. And so I would agree with Matt and the rest of you. I'm not so sure that in the writer of Hebrews, do not forsake the assembling together, that this would qualify. I think that, it's a great thing we have technology so that we can have our Sunday services still. I can't even imagine, what this would look like in the 70s or 60s or, no technology. How would we congregate? But I would say this though, the church has always been creative like that. Where there's been a problem, we have found solutions to it. And so I think part of the challenge I have is that the solution was already there because of the technology. In other words, we didn't have to stretch so far. And I'm wondering if, back to, I think, Tom's point, rolling out of bed and throwing on, maybe taking a shower, maybe not, like that is church now for a lot of people. Let's just be honest. But is it because we don't have to work that hard to meet? I mean, we just throw on Zoom, we throw on Facebook Connect or whatever it is, and now we're here together and we justify what we're doing because of the technology. I think the big question I have is what's going to happen when we get to go back together? Because of the convenience, guys, we are all in love with convenience. And so if I don't have to drive somewhere, if I don't have to get ready, and this still constitutes as church, should we keep doing it? So that's my next question, starting with you, T. Pitty, and working our way back around. When church resumes face-to-face and your friends decide to stay home because the church is going to continue to have an online service, would you come alongside of them and gently encourage them to get back into the rhythm of going to a actual physical building?
Yes, because that's where discipleship can happen. Yeah, you can have discipleship on here, but through conversation. But discipleship is definitely even more so in someone's life when we're doing life together and spending time with each other in each other's presence. So again, not to reiterate myself, but yeah, we need to be in each other's presence. So being in the house of God is very important together. Yes.
Tom Croak, I'm interested, you know, can you see the rationalization of not going and staying home? Would you do the same? Would you encourage someone to go to a physical building? Because that seems, honestly, it seems archaic. That seems so 20th century.
Yeah. I would. There's two things that like stick out. One is like worship. When there's just the two of us in a room, there's just an active of worship that's just different. When instead of like the unity of the brethren together when you're all worshiping. But I was thinking about this as well as Pitts was saying, is there's almost like this going to church that makes it sacred and special, right? So just going to my living room and plopping down, I could do that in front of Netflix or church, but actually taking the moment and going and making the effort to go to church marks it almost as like a little bit special and sacred in a sense. And I'm starting to kind of miss that aspect of it, where it's this moment to just dedicate to the Lord for a week.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, I would say that we should gather because we want to do what the Father has told us to do because he knows best, right? So I would say, yeah, you can't argue that there's no similarities. Like right now we are fellowshipping, right? But if we say the Lord's Prayer and we say, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, we will be much closer to that vision if we're together. And so last week we dealt with missing the mark as a definition for sin. We want to hit the mark by God's grace, and we hit that mark better when we're spatially close to each other than when we're distant. So I'd say that first of all. And number two, I just think there's certain things you cannot do unless you're together. So in 1 Corinthians 12, it says that the Spirit has given each one of us a gift for the common good. And yes, some gifts are currently in operation, but there's many that are not, because we need to be together to practice those. So I usher, and it's really hard to usher right now unless we're together spatially. So
Okay, so we're in this and we're all doing it. What might be some of the benefits now that we've done it for 5 weeks? What have you experienced as, I didn't see that coming, but it's really maybe helped me or my family? Matt, back around to you.
Yeah, so I just try to imagine, okay, what would this situation look like right now if we didn't have technology? And we would be a lot further from each other. So even if we just had a phone, we're not quite as close as we are now because we have a visual. So I think one of the benefits is we're all learning how to use some of the best technology out there. So we're growing in that area. So that technological advancement would be one of the big benefits I see.
Tom, what other benefits have you seen from past 5 weeks?
Speaking of missions conferences, there was just a leadership conference for church leaders, and it was amazing to get like insight from these church leaders throughout the country. They all had like a 15, 20-minute slot, and like that I've never been able to do is just to hear from them live and let people tweet them a question and they'd answer it back and forth. And these are the top tier people that typically I only read their books, right? So that was a benefit. The other one I think is the reconnection of family at church. Because it's a movement that we go to church, the parents go one way, the little kids here, middle kids, right? And there's this benefit of the family actually doing church together and being able to, the kids seeing what does mom and dad actually do at church look like. And so I think there's a benefit of that we maybe lost in the modern church.
That's I love that answer, T. Croak, because even last week, that's what our pastor was preaching, and we were able to hit the pause button and discuss things as a family. And that just isn't going to happen in when the pastor's preaching at you. We're not going to ask him to stop. And so a side note maybe is that preachers are taking a little bit more consideration to how do I preach and how is it effective, and do I need to have the best joke in the room to gain someone's attention? Because you see now, like a lot of these jokes are falling a little short because no one's there laughing with the guy. And so maybe they're reconsidering. So yeah, good stuff. T. Pitty?
It gives, I think the positive is definitely getting people to stay connected. One thing for me, it keeps me accountable in logging in on Sundays, or when we have a small group, or for youth group and things like that. So, and being here again, not to mention it again, being here alone, it keeps me connected with my community from a distance, So that I definitely see that as a perk.
What words of encouragement would you have to the youth pastors of the world as to, balance? I'll take anyone out there.
The first thing that struck me was, I think actually this strengthens the argument that you need in-person community, because at least I'm hearing from friends that are single, that live by themselves, from across the valley, how much that Zoom just doesn't cut it anymore. And so that there's just this huge disconnect. And so I think it even makes it a stronger argument that this is fine, but not long term. Like the in person, it just is desperately needed.
Anybody else? I love that, Tom.
What I've seen, being a youth leader, what I'm seeing is, I'm just speaking from personal experience too, but I'm seeing that it does have its advantages, but I could definitely see the hunger in the youth wanting to get back together and having that community. And I haven't been a youth pastor before, teenagers need to grow together. They need that. I mean, they need that person, that buddy, that, and even the youth pastor as a leader to be disciples. So I say I get it. I say I get what you're trying to do, but you need to have more face-to-face interaction than this old Zoom thing, if you will. So
yeah, no, if you think about it, we're doing the best we can, but I think the temptation will be, well, why fix something that's, we didn't know how it would work. Now we're doing it for 5-6 weeks and it seems to be working out pretty well. So why fix it? Let me just end with this, guys, last question. And that would be this. As we kind of flatten the curve and get used to this, and then we head on back, if your pastor called you aside and said, hey, not only how has it worked for you, but what recommendations would you have moving forward? Would you jettison the whole online thing for the sake of just bringing everyone back together, at least even for a season? Or would you say, you know what, so much good has come of this, I'm going to advocate, let's have 2 physical services and 1 virtual service? What would your recommendation be to your pastor at your church? Sorry, Matt, work our way around.
Yeah, once again, I would say that look at the scriptures. What captures the ideal on earth as it is in heaven? And then use technology to support that, not to replace it. And so yeah, I would still be kind of uncomfortable with a full online service, unless it's serving those that just can't make it to the service. But I would still want to press, hey, if you're in good health, the togetherness captures the heart of God more than just staying at home. So I'd want to make sure that message is clear.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. T. Pitty, what do you got?
Piggybacking on Matt, and the idea of heaven, I don't believe there will be online, what's it called, fellowship in heaven. So we need to start practicing what we're going to be doing in heaven down here. And so I would respectfully tell the pastor, I don't agree. I see the benefits in certain areas, but I think that we need to keep, building each other up together in each other's presence, allowing that intimacy with each other to grow. So
love it. Yep. Thanks, Tom.
I would caution against trying to build an audience, because the numbers might go up in the short term, but people go and hear and follow their pastors and actually experience life change once they build a relationship with the pastor and trust them enough to let him or her speak the hard truths to them. And so it's if you want to be a pastor who's actually going to speak truth to transform, that's going to be hard to hear. You need those in-person relationships, because otherwise the audience is going to flee the second you say something hard.
That's an excellent point. I wasn't even thinking about that. You know, how do you do church discipline virtually? Like, you know, I mean, I could just see, honestly, like, I know my arrogance, you know, the minute somebody says some difficult things to me, if I'm in the same room with them, that's a different conversation than, well, I'll just block you and walk away, or just, you know, put up my screen, you know, and just, I mean, that would be crazy. I said it was last question, but I got one more actually. This is happening a lot, guys, where I think, Tom, you might've mentioned it, where, and I experienced this. Hey, the upside is, like, on Easter Sunday, I think we did 4 different churches, because they slotted them, just it fell in that line. So I could say, hey, look how pious we are, from 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, we were doing church. But our motivation wasn't that. It was more like, if I'm being honest, consumer oriented, where I wanted to hear a certain band or listen to a certain preacher, or a guest artist or whatever. And so that's why we did it. If you had, let's say, an older child, or maybe, you know, one of your students came to you and asked for wisdom, hey, can I bounce around the web and find, you know, a multitude of different services, different bands and stuff? Or I was going to church ABC, not the best worship, maybe, not the best preaching, maybe, but that's where I go. And so would you say to that student or older child, then continue to do that? Even if there's better stuff out there, continue to log into your church on Sunday mornings and make that your primary service. Maybe if you want to have some ancillary services, whatever, but that's your primary thing. Like, don't leave your church just because the quality might not be that great, or there's better stuff out there.
With bouncing around on the internet, if that is in addition, right, to serving your local church, it's a little bit different when you're talking about spatially presence, because you can't do that on a Sunday morning when you're supposed to be in a location each week, because God has called you to use your gifts to serve a certain expression in a certain area. Right. But when it comes to online, I think you can, as long as you're continuing to serve your local church, if you want to do that later on in the day, that's fine. But just don't do that as a replacement to what God has called you to do in your local church. So yeah, my counsel for what Sunday mornings would look like in presence versus online might be a little bit different. So
let me just add to that. Maybe I'll bounce over to you, T. Pitt. Is it okay for me to have picture in picture, and on my screen I've got, hey, if this thing continues in the fall, can I have my church, you know, because I'm religious, so my church is on the big picture, but in the smaller screen I got, you know, in your case you'd have the Bengals losing another game. Is that okay? Or would you advocate, like Matt said, hey, your church is your primary church, so, you know, no other distractions while you're doing that?
First off, we got Joe coming in as a new quarterback, so we'll be okay. Second, because, you know, it is, you don't want to be distracted with a little screen. So I would say, no, you can't do that. I do understand what Matt is saying, and I do agree to a point. You need to be committed to your church and be in that community. Is it okay to go home and watch another sermon to be, you know, to grow your relationship with the Lord? That's fine, but the church, your personal commitment to your church is very important for that church to grow. And eventually hopefully you'll be sent out to build more disciples. So I believe staying there is very much a training ground for you, for a young person. Plus, we live in a nomad mindset here in America. For millennials, as myself, it's easy for us not to commit, for us to just walk around and travel around and just go around. And what took me to understand what it meant to commit was somebody older coming to me and saying, "Hey, be committed here, get involved here, stay here and grow with us." And so I think millennials and younger people need to be trained in that, learn how to understand what it means to commit and stay in a particular place so they can grow.
No, I love that. In fact, Tom, I'm going to switch just a little bit and end with you, and that is this. What advice would you have if a student came to you and said, I feel like I'm just taking a lot in this season. I feel like I'm going and just sitting online and watching, and I'm growing, and that's all fine, but I'm not giving back at all that I can think of. So they come to you and say, Mr. Croak, how can I give back to my church in this season? What advice would you have for them?
That is a great question. I don't have advice, because you want to know what I've been asking? That same question for myself. Because it does, right? Like, I'm at the stage where I feel like I'm just taking. I mean, sure, we can tithe to the church, but other than that, it's the buildings are closed, the ministries are essentially locked down, right? So I would encourage them maybe that this is the season. Like, maybe you can't give, but to look forward to the moment that you can jump back in and get to serve again. And you can serve your family, you can serve your neighbors potentially, but back to your church specifically, I feel like it's a not-win solution right now.
I love what you just said there with, if the opportunities are less now, could you be praying about it and God, create a hunger in me so that when I do get to go back, I already hit the ground kind of running with either who am I going to talk to or, about what can I do? I love that. Yeah. Either Tim or Matt, anything in the moment that you can think of? I know that our church, I think they have a portal where you can go, and if you need groceries or if you need, your lawn cut or something, that they have now a list of people that are willing to do that. Again, maintaining social distance, all that kind of stuff. But anything on top of that your church is doing or you can think of, how can we continue to serve in this moment?
I could just maybe give an example of how our family was served around Easter time. The children's ministry created baskets for all the kids, and they dropped them off at our front door. And so that was a very meaningful moment for our children. And so I think now is the time to pray. How can we do that? How can we get creative and just do different applications like that? So.
Yeah, awesome. T. Petty?
Encouraging social distancing, though. One thing that my church has done, I know in our youth group, we have graduates. We have birthdays are coming up, and pastors encourage us as youth leaders to be in our cars, but do a parade, if you will, beeping our horns, having posters celebrating that particular person, that particular student. We just did it this Friday. Big turnout. A girl was in tears, 13 years old, but she was in tears because she was just happy that she saw faces, man. I'm getting emotional, but it was good to see, like, seeing her gratitude, seeing her parents' gratitude for that was amazing. So there are ways to get off of the screen and serve. Yeah, and that is one way that I think my church is doing well on.
I love that, gentlemen. In fact, bringing this full circle, it's interesting that I think that in the moments where we're most affected during this season is when we're still doing things more face-to-face than virtual. So the fact that people got in their cars, even though I can't reach out and touch them, I can physically see them in the same space, brings tears to people's eyes. Amazing. So there is something to be said about physically being together. So hopefully that'll come sooner than later, gentlemen. As always, it's a pleasure. Hope you guys are doing well. Stay safe, and we will see you next time on Theology Talk. Take care, gentlemen.
Theology, theology, with Pitts and Croak and MOB. And Tonk.